Welcome back to a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. I'm your host, Andrew Rafal, coming to you from the Dream Plan Retire Studio. And today, listeners and viewers, we've got a special guest in the house. He's a great friend of mine, someone that I've looked up to for many years. Aaron Chamberlin, a well-known chef here in town, serial entrepreneur, and just overall good dude. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Love
Beautiful morning.
Love that you're here. So we got a lot of things to dig into today. Obviously, as you know, and we've known each other for years, being an entrepreneur is tough in itself.
Yeah.
Depending upon what industry, but for you, being a successful entrepreneur in the food, hospitality, restaurant industry is just it's like one in a million, right? So I want to learn today a little bit about how you were able to overcome some trials and tribulations and build some very successful restaurants and a brand, and all of that intersecting around food. And then we'll dig into a little bit of how as these last few years how you've kind of catapulted into some other industries.
Yeah.
But I think everybody loves food, right? So being a successful restaurateur, let's first look at where did food and just that industry, where did that passion come from as a young child?
Yeah.
Or did it come as a young child?
It did. It did. My family had been in the restaurant industry since the 30s. So someone in my family, either my grandfather, both my grandfathers were in the restaurant industry. One was an investor and the other one was a chef. And so growing up, food was just part of our life. My mother cooked great meals. We had a huge family. We ate around the table. I mean, all those special things. And so at an early age, around 9 years old, there was a photo in my kitchen of the house I grew up in. And it was a photo of my grandfather and all of his kitchen brigade. And for some reason, that photo, seeing that on a regular basis, really resonated with me. And I didn't know it at the time, but they were very noble. They were all standing proud. They were working together as a team. There was something there that really struck me. And then I loved food, of course. So I started around 9 years old, cooking things like microwave chicken with spices and just trying to kind of play around and learn different things. And then when I was in junior high, I knew I wanted to be a chef at an early age. And then when I was in junior high, a funny thing happened is that I was able to have the entire cheerleading team come to my house because I made fettuccine Alfredo from scratch. And that was when I realized how much food can influence people. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, all these people want to come. I go to school. They'd be like, oh my God, you make the best fettuccine Alfredo. And so at an early age, I knew that I was super interested in food and the culinary side and cooking, the technique. And I just started. I mean, my first job was in Apache Junction, Arizona at the Hearts Cafe, as a dishwasher, and that restaurant that sold, fed retirees. And I worked up from there. And by the time I was about 17 years old, I was ready to move to a bigger city. So I moved to San Francisco, and I was very fortunate to work immediately with an amazing chef named Michel Richard, who at the time was one of the top French chefs in the country. And worked there and really got my chops. I mean, I was, working like crazy, learning. My whole goal when I was younger was I wanted to go to France, because that was really kind of a big thing when you were, back in the 90s, was if you can go to France and you can work in French restaurants, then you can kind of write your ticket when you come back to the United States. So I was trying to go to France, and I ended up deciding to go to New York City. I worked in New York City with Jean-Georges Vongerichten and Daniel Boulud, and some of the best French restaurants in the country. And it was just, I was 22 years old, just working my tail off and learning my craft. And it was an amazing experience.
And, we think about, or for me, I'm watching the Bear. And that really, for a lot of us that haven't been in the industry, and I think those that dishwasher and servers, those people that have done that, you learn how to interact with people and you learn how to keep them happy. And it's just, I think that's a job everybody should do. Yeah. But how accurate, when you were working for these top chefs in New York City and San Francisco, as you moved on to, how accurate is that depiction of how cutthroat it is? And
Extremely accurate, but times have changed.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, I mean, you worked for free. I mean, I worked for free, multiple restaurants, did multiple things. I mean, in one of the most famous restaurants in New York City, Restaurant Danielle, I mean, they would kick the cooks if they weren't in line in the shins, you know, constantly screaming, the pressure. I mean, you had to really, really get in and be able to learn the craft and get up to speed really quickly, especially in the French kitchens.
And you're working 80-hour weeks, right?
Yeah, 78 hours a week. I mean, you're just going and, you know, when I lived in New York City, I worked 73 hours a week typically, and I made $425 bring home a week.
Did you sleep on the streets or?
No, luckily I was, you know, I moved into a place and I lived in a partial living room. And my rent was $700. So obviously it didn't add up too well. And I would cash my paycheck and I would have $10 for the entire week. And like, I just lived on that for 2 years. And to be honest with you, when I look back, that time period is what gave me the strength to endure the future challenges, because you know, for about 9 years, I mean, I worked like 6 days a week, 16 hours a day with almost no vacations. And so when you're constantly in that pressure tank and learning, and you know, as you get older, when trials and tribulations come to you, you can handle them a lot better, because I'm like, well, it's not as bad as when I lived in New York City.
And those memories of those, you know, busting ass for 2-3 years and learning and just, you know, head down, grinding it out. Are those, you look back now beyond learning the resolve, are those good memories for you? Just the simpler times?
You know, it's really interesting. I look back sometimes and fantasize about being back there, because, you know, when you're so enthralled in your craft, like, I didn't pay attention to anything. I didn't date girls. I didn't barely pay my bills. I mean, I had like 3 bills. I mean, my life was so simplified. I actually used to cash my paycheck and put it in a spice jar. And when the money was gone, I had no more money. And that's how simple my life was. And as you get older and complexities and children and all kinds of things, I look back and then I'm like, oh my gosh, what an amazing, simple time, because I could just focus on learning this craft. And I look back at it with lots of fondness. But at the time, it was rough.
Yeah, and you talked about in your childhood just seeing the happiness of cooking for these, you know, the friends, the cheerleaders, but also you had a big family, so being able to then to kind of represent that and, you know, look to take care of your siblings and see the joy that food can bring to people.
100%. I mean, to be in the restaurant business, you have to love service, and you are, you know, and this spills out into your personal life, and you know, you have to love to take care of people, and that has got to be one of the core things. Is your job, especially as a chef, is to nourish people. And so it can be nourish people emotionally, it can be nourish people with food, and so you have to really love that component of it, because there's so many challenges in the restaurant business and working in the restaurant business that if you don't love it, you're never going to endure. And right now I'm 37 years in the restaurant business. So, and I still love it today. I mean, I've had my ups and downs,
Sure,
but I still love the restaurant business today. And so almost 37 years, I've woken up almost every morning and gone to a restaurant, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, it takes a special person, you know, and as we'll talk through on how you built St. Francis and Taco Chelo and Phoenix Public Market. But you decided then you worked for these top chefs and lived the life, not really the life, but lived the, you know, absorbing it all, just gritty living in New York and great simplistic memories. But then you decided time to come back to the homeland, to the desert.
Yeah, I went actually from New York City. I went to New York City. I went to Boston. I lived in Boston for a few years, and then I went back to San Francisco. And then what happened was really interesting. I always thought I would live in a big city, either New York or San Francisco. And I had a really talented chef I worked for that went on his own in San Francisco and opened his own restaurant. And he was probably, in my eyes at the time, one of the most talented guys I knew as a craftsman. Well, he lost his business and his business closed. And that was a really eye-opener for me, because I realized that here's this guy that was really talented and he just closed his restaurant, and it really was a devastating thing for him and his family. And I saw all this, and it made me realize that San Francisco was a really challenging market. And at the time, I was just a small cook or sous chef, and I didn't have the connections and the resources to do my own restaurant. So I kind of decided I'm going to go back to Arizona. I have family there. I have a bunch of brothers and sisters. I have a brother that's an investor that's in real estate, and I have all these people that I could help, it would be a much easier road for me. So, and I also knew at that time I wanted to have a family, and I wanted to, have a home, and all of these things were going to be really challenging in San Francisco. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to Arizona. Came back to Arizona. At the time when I came back here, what I realized was I learned a lot about the craft and the art of cooking and running a restaurant, but I didn't know much about the business side. So when I came back here, I decided to make a shift from working in a bunch of high-end restaurants, and I decided I wanted to work at a place where I would learn more of the business, more of the operations, and I knew that that was my weakness at the time. So I moved back here, and I walk into a restaurant that had barely opened. It had only been open for like 30 days, and I order a sandwich. The sandwich was $6. It was really well done, and I saw all the owners there. One owner was playing with the music, one owner was behind the cash register, and it was a really cool place. It's called Le Grand Range Grocery.
Right. So this is back in the early 2000s?
2001.
Yeah. And so a lot of the listeners that live here in Phoenix, they know LGO, what is Le Grand Orange, it's called LGO. They know it now as this bustling corner of the, but back then when they had the vision to create this entity, I mean, that was a dilapidated lot. Nobody was going there, right? On 40th Street and Campbell, it was literally a dilapidated lot.
It was. I mean, the store that was at Le Grand Range Grocery before had a porn section. They sold porn videos. So they had really revamped this, and I saw what they were doing, and I met with the owners. I literally walked up to the owner and talked to the owner, Bob Lynn, and then he said, go talk to my partner, Craig DeMarco, and I met with them, and within like 30 minutes, we had a deal, and I was going to work next day for Le Grand Range Grocery.
And did they have Chelsea's opened at that
None
point?
Of that.
Okay,
so there was only Postino, which was Craig and Chris DeMarco's, and then there was Le Grand Range Grocery, and then plans for all this other stuff. Even the pizzeria next door was a different restaurant. So it was just that small end cap and, in the beginning stages. And so I went to work for them, and I learned about operations. Once again, I was in a position where I actually moved behind the restaurant. So I lived right behind Le Grand Range. I woke up every single morning. I would drive to the restaurant, and I would go to the owners and say, what are we doing today? And
every day was probably a different firestorm, or just every day brought it different challenges, but also probably some excitement to you as you're trying to build this brand and help them grow
it was a super exciting time. They had assembled a really good team. And so I was working with other great chefs, and it's kind of the same thing. We were planning on opening Chelsea's Kitchen, Radio Milano. They were planning on expanding into Los Angeles. So we had a lot of growth opportunities for ourselves. And also, they kind of pulled me out of the kitchen, and I started learning more about operations. I mean, at one point I was a general manager at Chelsea's Kitchen, so I was learning about the front of the house and all these variety of things. And so it was a really good opportunity for me to kind of have like a finishing school before I started to go and open my own restaurant.
Yeah, it's kind of like your MBA without having to go to school.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Did you feel, though, coming from working in these top restaurants with these top chefs, seeing the artistic work that they were doing, did you feel that moving to what you were doing, did it feel like beneath what you had been doing, or were you just all in immediately and saying, okay, this is the path I've chosen, and we're going to help feed the masses more than just the high-end clientele?
Well, to be honest with you, when I moved to Arizona, I applied to 22 restaurants, and I went on 22 interviews. And because I wanted to see what people were doing, see behind the scenes, see the kitchens and all that. I went to all these interviews, and ironically, I never even applied to Le Grand Range because I didn't even know anything about it. I just actually bumped into it. But what I realized is that, okay, I wasn't at the time in 2001, there wasn't as many good restaurants. The sophistication level wasn't there. And so I realized that, okay, I'm going to have to shift my mentality. And to be honest with you, I was kind of over the fine dining, spending 25 hours to prep for, a 6-course meal and all these things that went into it. And like I said, I was really longing for learning about operations, learning how to build a team, learning how to read a P&L, learning how to grow, how to raise capital and all that kind of stuff. And so I just kind of switched my mentality and I said, what was important to me at the time was good quality ingredients, following the seasons, and we were doing this here. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna learn this right now. And so I didn't have any of that.
Yeah. And was it now we know how successful those restaurants are. It was did you see in the beginning, was LGO, did it take time to build the momentum, or was it immediately a success and it's like this is what people were longing for?
It took time. It took, believe it or not, it took like a year, I think, for LGO to like really catch on to where it was like every day we were like busting out of the seams and looking on how to expand the space and adding the pizzas. And so, it took a little bit of time. It wasn't just this open the door gangbusters. And at the time, Bob Lynn was still working for Houston, so he had a full-time job. And so, it took a little bit of time, but after about a year, it was, just continually growth.
And you and I, we spend time at Houston's, have a ritual every 6 weeks or so. Did Bob bring the Houston mentality of, well run, always good service, food is always solid? Did he bring that, what he learned there, into?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. I definitely think, I think that he worked for Houston since he was like 19 years old. He was like one of their first employees. And so I think he was a really core part of building what Houston's is today, especially on the culinary side. And so although the food's not similar, but the similar style and, there's same capacity there. And so, yeah, he did. But at the same time, it was not a corporate restaurant. It was very small, mom and pop. Craig and Chris Marco lived in the neighborhood. We were hiring the kids that were going to high school. It was really kind of a small mom and pop independent restaurant at the beginning.
And so you're learning all of the tricks of the trade, not just getting away from the kitchen, learning how to run a restaurant, how to handle people, learning the back end, the finances. And so you've got a great trajectory there. And then what was the chronological in the sense of you deciding, hey, I can do this, and I want to build my own restaurant, my own brand. I want to be the entrepreneur and make this vision happen.
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to open my own restaurant. That's why I moved to Phoenix. I worked with them for 6 years. So 6 years, every morning I woke up, I went to work with them, and I basically on the corner of 40th Street and Campbell every single day for 6 years. And once again, it came to a point. Really what changed was my brother is in the real estate industry. He's in the property management as his core business. And he knocked on my door one day and said, hey, I think I can put together some money and we can open a restaurant for you. That's kind of what he did. Literally knocked on my front door and said this. And so then I was like, realizing, and now I have somebody who's interested in investing in me and investing in this. And, my brother used to bring potential investors to the restaurants, and I would like cook for them and, maybe showboat them around and show them the restaurants. And my brother said that he kind of had a strategy where he would bring them to dinner, and then on the way from dinner to the airport to drop them off, he would pitch them. And he said that the entire drive, they would always be talking about me and like the restaurants. And so he was like, finally, he was like, I bet I could get these guys to invest in a restaurant. So when that kind of all came about, I decided that I was, ready to leave Le Grand Range Grocery and at the time, LGO Hospitality. I was working at Chelsea's Kitchen, Radio Milano. At one point I was working at all the restaurants. And so I decided to leave, and I left. I had a little nest egg, and I had no restaurant space, no restaurant location. I just had some people that were interested, and I decided that I'm going to take that chance. Obviously, we always work on better under pressure. And I didn't have any kids or any responsibilities. And so I said, I'm going to do this. And it took me almost 2 years just to find the location of St. Francis. So I just started pounding the pavement, really looking at locations, and everything was important to me. And I found this old office building on Camelback and Central. And it took me 9 months to convince the landlord to turn it from office space into a restaurant.
Yeah, that's a big undertaking for land, to do that.
Yeah, he did not want to do it. He did multiple. He put us under the rigor of making sure that we were going to open that and do what we said we are going to do. But I literally would call him every Monday morning. I had an alarm, and I would call him every Monday morning, and I would ask him, "Hey, I want to do this," and half the time he would hang up on me, and all these different variety of things. And I found out where he lived. I actually used to drive by his house thinking hey, how can I get this guy to let me make this into a restaurant? And the funny thing is, at the time I had a girlfriend and she had some kids, and I learned about this guy. His name was Peter Mackus, and unfortunately he passed a while back. And I learned that he was a conservative, older gentleman. So I finally got him to meet me, and we were meeting Coffee Plantation in the Biltmore. And I told my girlfriend at the time to dress her kids up in their Sunday best. So I looked like we were coming in like we just came from church. This was my strategy. So I sit down, and he's with his lawyer and broker, and they just ate me for lunch. I mean, they just tore me apart. But he saw something at that time, and I'm telling him my story and my vision and what I want to do there and how I'm going to make this great thing. And at the end of my conversation, he looked at me and said, "I'm pretty much just going to assume you're going to fail."
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking, but he saw something in me in that. And then he opened the door a little bit, and then I was able to bring in my partners, and they're all real estate guys, and they all went to the table and negotiated. And after 8 or 9 months, we had a building to turn into a restaurant.
So listeners, persistency pays off. You've got a vision. You have to make it happen. It just, think about it. Most people would have reached out to him 3 times, tell you to F off, not returning your calls, hanging up on you, and they just go away.
Yeah.
So you had this innate inside you saying, this is my passion. This is going to work, and I'm going to do whatever has to be done to get him to see that. And that, so that itself, because your industry, persistency, perseverance, it goes hand in hand.
That kind of maybe attitude or mentality has served me so many times that, even today I'm working on something that people don't want me to do, and I'm literally going, okay, how do I figure out what angle to get this done? And not to be against them, but they don't see what I see, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going, and this has been part of my success the entire time, is just constantly grinding down on an idea and being persistent and just not letting it up and until you can find an opening and get in and get it figured out.
So for the listeners that don't know the backstory of St. Francis, so you get them to finally agree. He says you're going to fail. I would assume, 90+% restaurants fail. So you're like, okay, great. That probably lit your fire a little bit. But where did St. Francis come from? From the name and then the whole ambiance and the food that you delivered and just the overall atmosphere that you created in there. Where did that come from?
Yeah. So when I moved back to Arizona, it had changed a lot. I grew up in East Mesa, so I didn't really know downtown in Phoenix as well. And, I basically got a map, and I looked at this map, and basically I realized that Camelback and Central was the city, the center of the valley in my eyes. When you look at this map, it was really apparent, this is the center. So I drive to that corner, and there's 2 dirt lots. So there's a dirt lot with the light rail, and there was another dirt lot, and I'm going, okay, wait a second here. This doesn't make sense. I also knew that area had a lot of historic homes, and which meant to me kind of stability. I drove up the street to Lux Coffee, and I saw a bunch of hipsters, and I saw artists. I saw like-minded people, artists, professors, architects. And so I'm going, okay, this to me has kind of the coolest vibe that I'd seen in the Valley at the time. And so I just started on Camelback and Central, and I literally just went to every building and said, could this be a restaurant? Could this be a restaurant? And I did that all the way down to 40th Street in Camelback. And so I knew that corridor. Also at the time, no one had really opened up in Central and done kind of an independent restaurant. Everything was over in Arcadia or Old Town Scottsdale, maybe a little bit in downtown. And so I was like, okay, I can go in this area. There's not a lot of restaurants. We got historic homes, which means stability, hopefully. And that's kind of how I looked at it. And then I found the building. It was a 2-story building. It was red brick inside. I came from an urban environment, San Francisco, New York. When you're in the building, the feeling of being in a building like a 2-story almost made you feel like you were kind of, it was just unique for Arizona. Most people are in a single-story building,
in a
low
shopping
ceilings,
plaza,
in a shopping
everything was
plaza.
like-
It was a mid-century modern, which I was interested in design and architecture. So I was like really set on that building. That's why I stayed on the track. And so when I got the building, then I came to come up with the concept and the name and everything. And really what I wanted is I wanted a neighborhood restaurant. I wanted something to represent the name. When I went down to the city to get the kind of the plans and the lot line of the area, written right over the lot line was St. Francis Place. And that's actually the name of the neighborhood right behind Brophy. And I learned all this history. And so I originally was going to call it St. Francis Place. And then I decided to get rid of the place and just call it St. Francis. And the idea is that, you know, you see a lot of this in French restaurants back in Paris and France where, you know, the name represents where you are. And so that's where kind of the name came from. And that was kind of the idea is like, I want people to think St. Francis, you know, even the St. Francis Xavier Church is around the corner. And so I wanted just to be a part of that, that community.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's just a powerful name too. It kind of has that foundation to it and it feels comforting.
Yeah.
And then the ambiance, you know, for those of you that weren't in the restaurant, this is like 2013, 2014, is 2015
No,
or
we
so?
opened in 2009.
2009, okay.
Yeah.
So the ambiance of that though, again, your passion for architecture and
Yeah.
I always remember the lighting was just right.
Yeah.
You know, you go into some of these restaurants and it's just so light. You know, there
Yeah.
was just a little bit of dim to it. Concrete floors.
Yeah.
And it just had just
Raw red brick.
just the energy in
Yeah.
there. What about watching the Bear again? You hear about, you know, watching them come up with their menu and all the things that are going to be tied into it. Were you in this 8 months, 9 months that you were trying to, get the establishment itself? Were you working on your vision of what the menu would be and how people would feel, not just going into it, but the food that you were feeding them?
Yeah. So, being young and naive, not at all. Actually, I didn't start working on the menu until 2 weeks before we opened the restaurant. I'm not kidding around.
Wow.
So what I did was, my thought is that what I wanted to do was I wanted to put all my cooking toys in one room. And so I knew that the building had some rusticness to it, but outside was clean and modern, but inside was rustic. Luckily, I was, learning from Bob and Craig at LGO. I had worked on building Chelsea's Kitchen, so I'd worked with the architect, and I really understood how design and architecture was really a key component. And one of the reasons why I liked that building is I wanted to build something that could be timeless, that was really good in 10, 12 years. So I put a wood burning oven in. I knew I wanted to make my own bread. I wanted a big wood burning oven, and I wanted French flat tops, and I wanted this. So I kind of built half the kitchen as kind of rustic, wood burning, kind of where that kind of food would come from. And the other side, it was more refined, like the French kitchens that I'd come from. So I really just put all my toys in one room. And then I said, okay, what are we going to cook here? And you got to think about it. At the time, I'd already been working, the reason why I didn't spend so much time looking at what I'm going to cook was because I was an already established chef. I knew I could create a menu and work on something. And obviously I had ideas and dishes that I still probably make today and things like that. And so I just went into it organically. Literally 2 weeks before we opened, I was able to fire the kitchen. I went in there at 6 o'clock at night and would work until 4 in the morning and just coming up with what we were going to come up with. 2 weeks later, we opened the doors.
And how many employees did you need immediately to get things up and running?
I think when we first opened, we probably had about 40.
Wow. So all of a sudden, and you kind of were with Chelsea's, you were acting as general manager a lot, you were dealing with people. So that wasn't a huge step for you, but still now all the pressure's on you. You've got this landlord saying you're going to fail. You've got your investors, including a family member, and you just say, hey, listen, it's almost ignorance is bliss, right? It's like, we're gonna make it work.
100%. I mean, and that if I knew, it was really hard to build. We were running out of money constantly. It cost 3 times more than we thought it was going to cost, which happens almost every single time. And it was really challenging. You know, my brother was investing in me and trying to help out his brother, and he was building it. My dad at the time was down, the contractor. I mean, everyone. One guy who invested in us ran all the sprinkler system. You know, him and his wife came and dug the trenches. I mean, everyone was kind of pitching in to, you know, make this happen. And so, you know, if I would have known how hard it would have been, I will tell you today, I'm going to open a restaurant in 3 weeks. And it is a much different story than what I did back then. And, you know, this is just the learning pattern of, you know, sometimes failing and going through that. And so, yeah, it was a tough one.
And then flash forward, you created all that, a successful restaurant.
Yeah.
Right? Your first restaurant right off the bat.
Yeah.
Successful. And how many years were you running St. Francis before it was sold?
So we sold it in 2017. So I had it for 9 years.
Wow. That's a long run, especially in this town at that point. That's a long run.
Long run. And, you know, this is something interesting about, you know, the St. Francis, on the financial end, I could never figure out how to make money there. And so although it was this huge success, everyone knows me from it. That's where, you know, my reputation came from. People still, last night, someone bumped me and they're like, oh my God, I miss St. Francis. Yeah. I love it. So, you know, people adored the restaurant and we had the sales, but I could not figure out the business model. And so after those years of, you know, dreaming of opening my restaurant for so long, and after, you know, 7, 8, 9 years of not making money, and we made some, but like not really making me tweaking the model and trying this and trying that. I mean, I tried everything under the book. I had a somewhat of a flawed model. And so now I'm in industry that has a low margin with a flawed model. We had parking issues. All my top selling items were my highest food cost items, and everyone loved them and no one wanted me to get rid of them. And I had, you know, huge labor. Because I wanted to bake my own bread and have fresh bread on the table, we had 24-hour labor. So we had people working in the middle of the night. And then I had bar managers and sommelier, and it just was a real challenge. So at the time when I was growing and building other restaurants, someone came to me and said they wanted to buy the restaurant. And I said, I'm going to jump on this. I'm gonna take the money. I'm gonna run to these other restaurants because at the time I was just discouraged because I'm like, man, we've like all worked so hard here, and we've paid back the investment, but we would do $4 million in sales and spend $3,900,000, and you know, I mean, it just
and the optics though to the people seeing Aaron's this successful restaurateur, the successful chef, got a successful restaurant. The optics look great to the outside world. They probably think you're making money hand over fist, but it's a tough part of the industry.
It was a challenging and challenging, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to sell.
Yeah, and you sold in 2017.
2017.
And then you're like, hey, I got more passion. I've got more vision, and that's when you kind of went for a few years all in, trying to build a couple of different establishments at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so in 2012, I opened the Phoenix Public Market Cafe. And so now I had 2 restaurants. Phoenix Public Market Cafe had a lot more opportunity. It was a bigger restaurant. We had tons of parking. We had the farmers market every Saturday there. You know, although downtown was still, you know, in its development stage, it was a much better model, and so there was bigger potential for growth. So then, you know, my brother and I decided we were going to open a bunch of restaurants. We opened 3 restaurants, 3 different concepts in 6 months, and which was, you know, in hindsight, disastrous. But it was, and so I focused on that, and we went to Tempe, and we built the Tempe Public Market. We built a new concept called Ghost Ranch, and then we built Taco Chelo and on Roosevelt and Fifth in downtown. And you know, after that, going through that, so we went from like about 80 employees to 480 employees, and you know, the infrastructure, and you know, it was a really challenging time. And through that time, I decided that I wanted to do this on my own, that I didn't want to have these partners, that it was caught in too many, I was doing too many things that I really didn't want to do because of the influence of the partners and the finance. So I went to my brother and convinced him, hey, let's break the company. You take the 2 restaurants in the East Valley, Tempe Public Market, Ghost Ranch, and I'm going to take Phoenix Public Market and Taco Chelo. And Taco Chelo is something that I actually would never open a Mexican restaurant, but I had an employee who worked for me forever named Sunny Santana, and he was a natural leader. I liked spending time with him. Him and I have been through thick and thin for the past 15 years. And he came to me one day and told me that he wanted to open a taco shop with his dad. And when he said that, I was like, no, I got to figure out how to keep this guy. And then we were also influenced because we had a really close friend, Gennaro Garcia, who's an artist who had designed restaurants. So me and Sunny and Gennaro went on a taco tour in California. And on the drive home, I said, why don't we just open a taco restaurant? Gennaro, I want you to design this taco restaurant like you're painting a piece of art. I want you to sign it at the end of it. Sunny, you're going to bring your heritage and your culture and all your history. You're going to do the food. I'm going to find the location. I'll get the business going. And 1 year later, we opened Taco Chelo.
And Taco Chelo was, out of all your restaurants, the smallest, the least amount of employees. Yeah. So for you, it was probably like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. I can have a restaurant that's successful and not have all the headaches.
Yeah. So what changed there was that at all the other restaurants, I was, deemed the chef and working in the kitchen and guiding the culinary talent. Well, now Sunny had worked for me for 14 years, and I had really taught him everything I knew. And he's also a very diligent guy and went out and learned on his own. And so he was just increasing and getting more and more experience and getting better at his job and craft. And so Taco Chelo, when it opened, I didn't have anything to do with the kitchen. I would influence or suggest or recommend, but I wasn't going back there and cooking in there. So it alleviated me to spend more time on like working on the business and like marketing and how are we going to do this and the aesthetics and how do we treat the employees better? How do we do this? And so that was kind of the big change. And so once we split and then I had the 2 restaurants, then COVID happened and the Phoenix Public Market closed and I was planning on reopening it, but then the landlord sold the building. So I was in a stage where I couldn't reopen it because the building was going to be turned into an apartment complex. So I decided that, okay, I'm just going to put all my energy in Taco Chelo right now and just focus on Taco Chelo. And it had been successful since we opened up, and it's the smallest business the smallest restaurant we've had. And on paper, it's a beautiful model and it does super well. And we're getting ready to open our second Taco Chelo in 3 weeks. And have plans to open a third one in Gilbert. And so we're just going to focus on this one model right now.
Yeah.
It's also been great to be able to see someone come and work for you. I mean, we have a lot of staff and watch them progress and then build something where they can all be part of it and their goals and visions can be part of what we're doing. So that's also been really gratifying.
Yeah. So sometimes there's a blessing in, with the pandemic and the issues that it brought for all industries, but more so yours. Yeah. And with, Phoenix Public Market, looking back, maybe if you had a lot more of your attention on that instead of trying to expand and build all these other ones, maybe it would have been different. But the fact that you were able to, close that down and almost maybe not look like a failure because we can blame it on the pandemic, but overall there was probably some issues there with the amount of people you had to have, employees, and people maybe aren't buying a lot of stuff. They're using it as that neighborhood hangout, which was really cool and helped build that additional celebrity status for you. But sometimes things are a blessing, right?
100%. I mean, first of all, I've had a lot of failures, but it's funny because obviously it's kind of like living in New York City. There's a lot of pain that comes with that. There's a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors, a lot of maybe the ways you treat people that you look back and you regret. But all those mistakes have just made me so much stronger today. I'm so clear on what we need to do. I'm so clear on how we're going to do it. And it's because of all those mistakes and all those failures and money lost. I mean, when I closed the Phoenix Public Market, I lost like $650,000 just gone out of my own personal money. I mean, there's just been but once again, I'm 50 years old. I've had all this past history, and now I feel so confident in like what we're doing and how we're doing it that I have almost a sense of ease because although it's challenging and there's going to be bumps ahead and, it's always up and down, but I went through all that and it was, my education.
Yeah, and being able to build these that are, bringing in revenue, but most importantly, profit,
Yeah.
and then being able to take this and say, here's the concept, opening the next one in Tempe, we've got Gilbert coming, and all of a sudden we could look in 5 years and you have 7, 8 of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
that's
becomes
kinda-
a real business now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, our goal, we have a plan that by the end of 2026, we're going to have 5 locations, and we're going to get to that point, and then we're going to kind of look up, and we're going to, really hone in on our infrastructure. It's also been really interesting because now I don't have to do with anything in the culinary. I can spend all my time on the business end. And, in the past, we were like borrowing money and had investors and all this stuff. And now me and Suni and Gennaro are funding all of these. Like we're it just ourselves. We're going and getting our own money. We don't have to rely on anyone. No one else is in there. We're all down there working together, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And so and we believe that we have a great concept. We think that we have something unique. Even though taco space has a lot of taco shops, but we think we're doing something different and a little bit unique. And so that's kind of the goal. We're just going to stay focused on that and kind of see what comes out of it from there.
And I love the fact that you're seeing some of these longer term employees with you being able to grow.
Yeah.
A lot of times in your industry, they feel like, I'm stuck. I don't
hard.
have it. And so now you've got this growth trajectory and allowing the loyal employees to go from maybe being a dishwasher to then, helping to cook and being a sous chef to then helping in the managerial role.
It's really powerful when you, coming from your industry, when you make people money, it really changes your guys' relationship, and it really changes the loyalty, and really changes the connection and cohesiveness. When you're not making money, and then it's kind of constantly, or you're not making somebody else money who's invested, it's challenging.
Yeah, and I having known you since 2018, I've just seen kind of your trajectory, and over these last maybe 18 months, just the calmness that you have.
Yeah,
which is cool to see.
Definitely. I mean, my whole life has changed. The pandemic was, obviously challenging for some people, but it was the best thing that happened to me. And one of the things that was great about it was it forced me to shrink down. It forced me to get clarity so I could start building. At the time, right before the pandemic, I had my 3rd child, so I had a brand new baby in the house. We were having a blast, raising this little boy, and it got me to simplify and kind of clarify on what I wanted to do. And, pre-pandemic in 2016, I had a little bit of money, and I had a goal to invest in another industry. I was looking at the restaurant industry, and I was like, man, this is such a hard industry to make money in. And I was an EO, that's how I met you. And I had seen other businesses. It was a big eye opener because, I would show up to the financial meeting with EO, and we'd share our financials, and my financial would be like 4 pages long. And then the real estate guy would come, and he would have like 6 line items and a bunch of profit. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I need to find another industry to invest in. And I had saved a little bit of money. So I was looking for in an industry. And so I was interested in cannabis at the time. And so I was I told myself, I'm going to find a cannabis company I can invest in. So I went down this path of trying to meet people, reaching out to this person, reaching out to that person. And I got invited to do a dinner at some folks' house, and I catered the dinner, and I was sitting there talking to the husband. He's like, yeah, I just started a cannabis company. And his name was Five Symington, and that was Copper State Farms. And I said, oh, can I have your business card? So he gave me his business card, and I emailed him multiple times, I think like 14, and he responded back, and I said, hey, I want to come and check out your guys' grow, where you guys grow. And I was just trying to find a way to get in. And ironically, his grow is in Snowflake, and we have a family cabin up in Pinedale, which is the next town over. So he invited me to Snowflake to tour the grow. And so I was super excited. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go and pitch this. At the time, I don't know how much, but it was not very much, that I was going to try to invest in cannabis. And so I go meet him, and shocked at how big of a grow they had. I mean, they have a 150-acre grow in Snowflake, Arizona. It's a greenhouse grow. It's an old tomato farm. I mean, it's like pulling up to a football stadium. And in my mind, I'm thinking that I'm going to pull up, and there's going to be like some hoop houses with a trailer and he's going to show me the hoop houses. Well, I was really shocked. So I'm on this tour. He tells me that at the end of that night, he has a chef that's going to cook dinner for us. So at the time, I owned the Phoenix Public Market, and we had a bakery. So I brought a bunch of all of our baked goods, like 30 different items, baked goods, cookies, Pop-Tarts, a variety of stuff. I packaged them up, and my idea was just to give them to the chef as a gift for cooking for us. So I'm driving up there, have my bag of baked goods. We go on the tour. While we're on the tour, he says, "Oh yeah, this is going to be," because the place is still under construction. So they just started Copper State. They had 16 employees, and he said, "Yeah, this is going to be our kitchen." All of a sudden, boom! I'm like, "Kitchen? I know kitchens." And I'm like, "What are you guys doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, we're going to bring a third party from California to come in. They're going to do an edible company." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So tour ends up. He says, "Okay, I'll meet in a couple hours. Come over. We're going to have dinner." So I went back to my cabin. I had 3 hours, and I said, "I'm going to build a plan to create an edible company." And at the time, there was no edible companies, at least in Arizona, where like an independent chef was doing unique flavors and things like that. It was all pretty basic stuff. So I created this plan in 3 hours. I showed up to dinner. And every one of the owners of Copper State Farms is there. It's me and every single owner. So I pitched them this idea, and they have no clue that I'm going to do this. I'm like, pitch them idea, and I have all these baked goods from my bakery, and I'm like, we can infuse this cookie, we could do this, we could do that. At the end of dinner, we had a handshake, and we were going to create a business together. So that's where Good Things Coming came from. And once again, this goes back into the persistence. I remember at like 12:45 at night, I'm driving home from this dinner, on this dark road, calling my wife, and I'm like, "We're getting in the cannabis industry." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I just saw the opportunity, and I said, I really like the owners and Scott Barker and Fife and the team they had there. And I was like, "You know what? We're going to do this." So I was in the middle of opening all these restaurants too. So I had way more on my plate than I could even imagine, but I just was, saw the opportunity and said, "I'm going to do this." And so we created Good Things Coming, and then eventually, when COVID happened and I shut down the Phoenix Pub Market, they asked me to come in and be the CEO of all the brands that they had, and so I morphed into the cannabis industry for a few years, and it was a beautiful thing. I learned tons. I've spent my entire life working in a kitchen, working in a restaurant. So to go to like a corporate office and manage people and do that was a huge learning curve, but it was really good. It got me to really, learn so many skills.
Yeah, and it had to have been refreshing for you to get out also on the road and be able to just not be locked into this kitchen, this box day after day.
It was actually really good for me because, to be honest with you, pre-COVID, I was really discouraged about the restaurant business. I'd split from my partners. I didn't have that many restaurants. I had the two. I was kind of discouraged by, the industry was changing. Everything's going fast casual. The craft that I loved, I was spending all this time with employees. And so it was actually a really good refreshing, to just not go to a restaurant every day for a little while.
Yeah.
And learn some new things. And also, Fife and Scott, the owners of Copper State, are both one came from Stanford, one came from Harvard. They were very sophisticated leaders, and I didn't see sophisticated leadership in the restaurant very often. And so it really helped me to learn a little bit more about leadership on how to handle employees and deal with things, because I kind of came from the renegade restaurant business, and so that was another really good lesson that I learned with them.
Right, which you've been able to parlay into the growth of Taco Chelo. Fascinating there on the cannabis side. So as we wind down today, I know one of the other passions that you have, with food, like music, it brings memories, brings family, getting the family together. You've got 3 wonderful, awesome boys.
Yeah.
And I know for you, food is what goes into the system. We have just so much crap right now. These kids are eating crap, right?
Yeah.
And then why do I have ADHD? Why do I have this? Why do I have that? A lot of it is the food, right? So one of your other passions has been making sure that we're getting good food out there, or educating the moms and the dads of the world of what I'm doing for my boys, and what they can be doing. So you had this kind of other business as well, where you were building your celebrity status and chef dad. And, really from that standpoint, what's your passion with that side of the business and helping people again, but helping people make healthy choices?
Yeah. I'll tell you from my experience, when I was around junior high, I started gaining weight. My weight's fluctuated my whole life. I have had food addiction issues. It's still challenging to this day. And I learned that, you got to start your kids early on good, healthy food. And you got to start your kids early on understanding on what food does to your body, how you feel, how it reacts, and at least educating them. Even though they're little kids and they're still going to love sugar, they're still going to want the candy. But if you can spend time educating. So I kind of started working on a brand called Chef Dad. I've had some ideas about building a book and building a brand around it and doing more social media. And really the whole goal would be to, I'm not as interested in educating the kids as I am the parents, because the parents are really the ones that are catalysts. Is, the goal would be to help build healthier households, and then once I started diving into that, I started realizing that, even running a modern day household can be challenging for people. How do I shop? How do I store things? When you have kids, like right now I have 3 kids, if you have 3 meals a day and a snack, I think that's 28 meals you have to prepare. So if you're going to prepare 28 good nourishing meals a week, it takes a lot. Like it's almost like taking a professional to be able to produce that, purchase, buy the right ingredients, then what do you make? And so I see a lot of parents that have been challenged with one category or another. They don't know what to make, or they don't know how to buy the ingredients, and then I shop, they buy too much. And so that would be really the thing is that how can I help parents really run a modern day household, and everything from composting to trash to recycling to setting your home kitchen up properly. I go in most kitchens and I see them and I'm like, wow, like you guys, like, people have like 6 bread machines from when they got married, and just things that you're like, kitchens are streamlined. My kitchen at home is streamlined. I make every breakfast and every lunch and almost every single dinner for my kids and my family, my wife. And this kind of goes back into service. I mean, this is what I'm doing for them right now. My goal is to get them when they're 17 years old to leave the house and they're thriving. And so that's where that passion came from.
Yeah, and I even, over the years, we've had retreats that we've gone on, and I still remember, you always cook for us, but this paella that you made for us when we went up to these cabins up near actually your cabin up in the White Mountains, and I can still see it. I can still smell it. Yeah. I can still taste it. And, it just brought us eight of us together over that food. And that's just the tremendous power that food can do. And the fact that you were so passionate about doing it. And we're just sitting there in awe of you're just huge. This thing is about as big as this table here. And it's just it looked like artwork, a piece of art. Yeah. And then it tasted even better. Yeah. So that was awesome. And I know one of the things you taught me too, a lot of times that you were doing is trying to cook a bunch of these meals too for the family on like Sunday, where you're going to, get the kids together, get all the, go to the farmer's market and then make a bunch of meals and do it in a manner where the kids are watching you do that, and then making life easy too, because you've got these fresh meals. We've got 3, 4, 5 days worth of food, making, service in that sense of making life easy for your wife who's running, 3 kids, which is a heck of a job in itself.
Totally. I mean, if men out there, if you want to make your wife happy, fill the refrigerator with food, and make things easier. So on Sunday we make big, huge meal, and then we kind of have extra throughout the days that we could, incorporate. Last night we roasted asparagus, and this morning my kids had asparagus with eggs from the leftover last night. So it's really about cooking once and eating 3 times, or something along those lines. And so that's another thing that we do, so that every day I'm not starting from scratch. I'm, cooking things kind of ahead of time and planning and organizing that. And I think that it's when you don't have the skill set or the mindset, and it becomes really easy for parents to default to the processed foods. And so that's what I really love to do, is get parents to put more energy and effort into creating and planning meals. I will tell you that right now, my favorite time of the week, the day, anytime, is sitting around my little table with my little family and having food. And sometimes it's a shit show, and sometimes it's beautiful, but I don't care. It's still something that I look forward to every single day.
Yeah, and then the memories that the boys will have as time goes on, and they'll look back to it, because that is one of the other problems too. As you mentioned, a lot of these households, both are working and they're not doing dinners together, maybe once a week. And so the kids are out there on their own, and it's just building that construct inside the house and building the memories. We can center around food and just kind of decompressing and taking a breath.
All my kids, I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old. They all have their own knives. They work in the kitchen with me when they want. And they all know the basics of cooking. I mean, they can cook hot food. I mean, I woke up one night and like 1 a.m. and my son was searing hot dogs in a cast iron pan. He was hungry. And so, I think getting them skill set into that. Most kids today, they know everything about computers, but they know nothing about nourishing themselves. So even just those little things like that, my kids are going to be able to cook for themselves and nourish themselves and understand it. Even now, they understand the difference. They know when they eat a bunch of stuff, when we eat a bunch of candy or pastry or whatnot, they're like, or, and not that it's bad food per se, because I don't think there's any bad food, but this is what this does to my body and makes me feel. And so if I want to feel good, then I need to eat this. And so it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And they're going to make some future partner very, very happy being able to cook for them. It's the entree into their hearts. So they're on a good track.
Which is funny because they all at times say that they want to be a chef.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm not going to persuade them one way or another. I'm going to let it happen. But
yeah. Well, this has been fantastic to hear your journey, weathering a lot of storms. Just the industry itself in the restaurant industry is a storm. Being able to learn from really good people, being able to continue to evolve and expand from your vision into reality, having those little knocks around the way, and dusting yourself off, finding your path. And now really, I feel like you're in a great zone, and we're really excited to see Taco Chelo, the growth of those, and some of these other things that you have in store for you. So it's been awesome. We appreciate you taking the time today. And I think the audience and the listeners gained a lot. And hopefully more than anything, they learn about persistency, perseverance, whatever industry you're in. Make time for family, learn how to cook good food, and just focus on what makes you happy. So thanks for joining us today. This has been enlightening.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Listeners, all the show notes will be below the video on YouTube, as well as the episode page. Ways to get a hold of Aaron and see what he's doing. And if you're local and you haven't tried Taco Chelo, please go and try it. It is a fantastic food atmosphere and just a great environment all around. So thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for later in the month for a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Spotify and on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you all. Happy planning, everybody. We'll see you real soon.